Today I'm going to show you an example of how to do a two-point perspective using letters. So let's start with our horizon line. This gives us an idea of where our eye level is. With two-point perspective, we are going to have two vanishing points. We want to make sure that we separate those as far as we can across our paper. You could even have them off the paper, but that requires a little bit of extra work, so I'm not going to do that right now. Unlike one-point perspective, with two-point perspective, we're not looking at the front face anymore. We have angled this almost like you're looking at the corner. So what we're going to draw is the front edge instead of the front face. We're going to take the top and the bottom of this edge to our vanishing point. I'm creating the right front face. You guys should have already watched a review on how to put boxes into two-point perspective. I don't want to put the whole box in right now because I'm going to take this front right face and I'm going to turn it into a letter. We want to make sure that all vertical lines are perpendicular to our horizon line. So that means that our vertical lines are straight up and down. So let me show you what's happening. Here is how I would put a letter into a box to plan out my shape if I were doing it in one-point perspective. So this is what my letter S would look like. I'm going to do an S for Settlemyre. So here's my letter S, fitting inside a nice little box. If I were doing one-point perspective, this box would be just a straight-on face. And then I would take all of my points and my tangents to my vanishing point. For cutting it short, I would simply try to recreate that back face. But that's one-point perspective. When we're working with two-point perspective, this box has to go towards one of the points. So I'm going to take my vanishing point and my front edge, and I'm going to create that same box going towards the vanishing point. Now, any horizontal lines, like these lines on the S, are going to have to aim to the vanishing point as well. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that same S shape and I'm going to squeeze it into this box. Now again, my box is no longer a straight rectangle with right angles. My box has been squished down to fit towards our vanishing point. So one point is squared off, but 2 point is going to squish towards your vanishing point. Now I'm going to do the same thing here for my second point that I would do with one-point perspective. And I'm going to grab any tangents and I'm going to grab any of the points and I'm going to aim them at that second vanishing point. And cutting it off is pretty similar too. Now here, that line should angle out to the vanishing point as well. So you can see that the shape is slightly different. It squishes in two directions. Whereas one point, you have a straight face and it goes back to one point. So let's look back at this final picture. I'm doing the S on this and I want to kind of mark where I want my horizontal lines to go. Now remember, any horizontal lines have to go towards a vanishing point. Because I'm working on the front face, on the right, I want to make sure that those horizontal lines are aimed to my right vanishing point. You can almost see the S shape forming. So now I'm going to get my curves in here. And a neat little trick when you're doing this to figure out where the center of your rectangle is is to draw lines across the corners. Makes an X inside of your box. Since your square or your rectangle is altered to go towards the point, we can't just imagine where that halfway point is. It's going to be slightly to one side because things are going to get smaller as you get closer to the point. So this helps me find my middle point. And I'm going to come in and I'm going to grab this curve here and I'm going to grab the one on the bottom side. I may kind of change it and alter it as I go. But I'm imagining where this curve is going to fit inside this altered rectangle, which is now a trapezoid. And you can see how doing this gives that S a slightly squished shape, because that face of the S has to be going towards my vanishing point on the right. Alright, I don't like the way the bottom looks, so I'm going to adjust that just a little bit. Okay, let's do some cleanup action so we don't get confused by all of our lines. I now have successfully made the right face with my letter going towards the vanishing point, and I want to get rid of all the rest of these lines so that I don't have to worry about what's going to go to my second point, which is on the left. So again, just like any other drawing that we do, it's really important to draw your lines really lightly so that you can come in and erase with ease. Especially when you're doing perspective drawings, because you're going to erase a lot of guidelines. Alright, so here we have an S going towards my right point. But I need the thickness of the S to go towards the left point. So I'm going to look for any of my corners. And since my face went to the right point, the depth is going to go to the left point. So now I'm making use of that second point in two-point perspective. And this is going to feel a lot like one point when I'm doing this part here. Now, just like with one-point perspective, in order to catch the edge of that curve, I need to come in and catch that tangent. So I've just kissed the edge of that curve. I have one down here as well. Now I'm going to catch that tangent. I'm trying to clean up my lines here so you can see what I'm doing and what I'm going to end up with. Now, just like everything else, we don't want it to go on forever and ever, so I'm going to find a nice place to start cutting, and I want to match what that line was doing. Kind of eyeball that and see what I think. Yep, that's not going to look right. So really what I need to do is follow that and realize, oh, that's going to come up a little bit. Now, this is a horizontal line. So this horizontal line really should line up with the point. So I'm going to make sure I take my ruler and I grab it. I was pretty close, but I just want to make sure with my ruler. Get a nice crisp line there and then follow this line out here. Alright, I'm going to clean up these edges, and I'm going to come in and erase a little bit so that you can see what this looks like. Go ahead and take all that back off. Of course, I want to make sure I keep my horizon line just to kind of keep track of what's above and what's below. It helps me make sure I've got all my points, all my edges and sides. And the more I clean off all these lines, the less mess I make too, because you're going to smudge some pencil line. So that looks pretty good so far. I'll clean those edges up again. So this gives you a letter S going back into perspective. So you've already done a box. You should have done 3 boxes, one on, one above, and one below, and a practice round. And this gives you a curved letter going back into 2-point perspective. All right, I'm gonna speed up the rest of this so that you can see how this goes, since we did this one slowly. And I'm gonna start putting some other words in there. All right, I'm setting up a face where it's a left face instead of a right face, because you don't have to just do one side. You can alternate between the sides for different letters or different words on your paper. And I set up the word art just because, you know, why not? And then I'm going to take the depth back to my other corner. So remember, the face goes to one corner and the depth goes to another corner. All of your horizontal lines need to line up with one of the vanishing points. Now I'm going to do the same thing along the bottom. And I just sort of have them lined up in the same row. If you look at it, the letters get smaller and smaller as they get closer to the point. And on this side, I'm sticking with faces on the right side. And I'm going to take the depth over to the left, catching all those tangents and all those corners. And I want to make sure the back side looks somewhat like the front, because again, that back face is going to look very similar to that front face. So that's what it looks like finished off. Here I showed the coloring. I'm coloring the letter faces, you know, whether it's on the left or the right, with a nice solid color. And then as it ventures off into the distance, I'm kind of changing up the values there. I sort of looked at it from what was on top and what was on bottom, what was on the side. I think this ended up really cool looking. I like the way it looks. I picked the S for Settlemyre, and of course, you know, throwing a little message of Art Rocks. Pick stuff that you think is cool. If this is too simple for you, check out my other video on the more complicated, challenging one. I hope you guys enjoy this and have fun.